The red Camry, Carol Ann's car, sat in the motel lot like a punch to the gut. "Isn't that your wife's car, Dale?" Ed asked, pointing, his tone too casual, too loud. My world splintered, leaving me exposed, a raw nerve, right there in front of my boss. Her casual disregard for everything we built hit me like a cold, arrogant shove. Dale Miller had always valued routine, the quiet certainty of things. For 22 years, his days in Pennsylvania had been a steady rhythm of work at the accounting firm, evenings spent on his small patch of lawn, and dinners with Carol Ann. He believed their life was stable, the foundation solid. Yet a subtle shift had occurred in Carol Ann, a quiet restlessness that had begun to hum beneath the surface of their quiet home. He noticed her looking out the kitchen window more often, her gaze distant, a yearning he couldn't quite place or soothe. He bought her flowers, suggested weekend trips, but the quiet unease in her eyes remained. His trust in their bond ran deep, a bedrock belief in the vows they had exchanged. He had built their home, paid their bills, raised their daughter Sarah, all with an unshakable faith in their shared future. It never occurred to him that Carol Ann's quiet dissatisfaction might lead her outside their marriage, into a space he couldn't see or reach. He simply thought she was tired, perhaps, or waiting for something new to ignite her spirit. Just last week, Dale had seen something troubling. He was picking up supplies from the hardware store when he spotted Sarah's boyfriend, Chad Reynolds, in his beat-up pickup truck. Chad wasn't alone. A blonde girl, not Sarah, sat close beside him, their heads together in a way that left no room for doubt. Dale's first instinct was to call Sarah, to warn her. But her crucial volleyball game was the next day, a championship match. He decided to hold off, to let her focus, protecting her from the sting of betrayal until the right moment. He'd tell her after, once the game was done. Then came the offer from Ed Thompson, his boss. A promotion, a significant jump in pay, and a transfer to Daytona Beach, Florida. The company even offered a rent-free apartment for the first 6 months. It felt like a sign, a chance to shake off the quiet dust that had settled over their lives. A fresh start for Carol Ann, for both of them, in a warmer climate. Dale accepted, hopeful, envisioning sandy beaches and a rekindled spark. The following Tuesday, Dale was driving Ed Thompson to the airport. The mid-morning sun cast long shadows from the roadside trees. They passed the familiar stretch of Route 30, past the chain restaurants and the local motels. Then he saw it, a bright red Camry, Carol Ann's car, parked askew in the lot of the Sunnyside Motel. His gut clenched, a cold fist tightening beneath his ribs. The placement was suspicious, too deliberate, too far from the front office. A cold dread settled over him. He made a quick decision, pulling his company sedan into the next motel's empty lot, out of sight. He told Ed he needed to check a tire, making up some quick excuse about a slow leak. Ed just grunted, already buried in his phone. Dale got out, walked briskly to Carol Ann's car, a small, sharp tool hidden in his palm. He knelt, pretending to examine his own tire. Then swiftly, with a soft hiss, he punctured Carol Ann's spare. Just enough to let the air out slowly, not a blowout, but enough to ensure she wouldn't get far. He wanted time. He wanted to understand. He got back in his car, hidden in the shadows of the motel office. He waited, his hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. The minutes stretched, slow and agonizing. He expected her call, expected her to be stranded, to reach out to him. But the phone in his pocket remained silent. An hour passed, 2. The dread in his stomach hardened into a cold, metallic lump. Then hushed voices, closer than he expected, drifted through his open window. He strained to hear. Carol Ann's voice, clear despite the low tone, complaining about the flat. "Damn thing, now what?" she muttered. Another voice, deeper, reassuring. "Don't worry, Carol Ann, I'll get it fixed. It's nothing." Gary Jenkins. Dale recognized the voice instantly. Gary, from the sales department, the one with the easy laugh and the perfect hair. Dale hadn't known they knew each other beyond the office. Dale's heart plummeted, dropping into a black void. He watched through the tinted glass as Carol Ann and Gary walked back toward the motel entrance, Gary's arm lightly on her back, guiding her. They disappeared inside, leaving Dale alone in the company car, the crushing realization settling over him like a tombstone. He replayed the snippets of conversation. The ease in their voices, the casual intimacy. Gary's smooth reassurance, Carol Ann's acceptance. It wasn't just a casual meeting. This was something woven into the fabric of their days, an understanding that had bypassed Dale completely. The disregard for his home, for their life, felt immense, a silent shout in the quiet afternoon. The Midwestern sky above him, usually a vast, indifferent blue, seemed to darken, the sunlight losing its edge, even though it was midday. A chill moved through the car, raising the fine hairs on his arms. Dale remained still in his company car, pressed back against the seat, the engine off. He felt a strange sort of stillness settle over him, a quiet numbness that was almost worse than the initial shock. He watched the motel entrance, the main road, the entrances to the lot. He saw a familiar silver Honda Civic turn in, Sarah's car. His daughter, a tire in her trunk, pulled alongside her mother's red Camry. Carol Ann and Gary reappeared from the motel, walking toward the cars. "Gary, please take care of this," Carol Ann said, her voice carrying across the asphalt. "Sarah has a game tonight. She can't be late." Dale heard it clearly, a casual instruction, as if Gary was simply a helpful neighbor. Carol Ann seemed oblivious to Dale's hidden vantage point, or perhaps she simply didn't care. Sarah stood by her Civic, her face tight with a familiar teenage frustration that now seemed layered with something much heavier. She looked at her mother, then at Gary, her eyes narrowed. "If you cared," Sarah snapped, her voice sharper than Dale had ever heard it directed at her mother, "you would have gotten ready before I got here. I need to get to school." The words hung in the air, weighted with an unspoken accusation that Dale understood immediately. Sarah knew. She knew about Gary. Gary stepped forward, a smooth, practiced smile on his face. He put a hand on Sarah's shoulder, an act that made Dale's jaw clench. "Hey, it's all right. We'll get assistance for the tire right away, and I'll be there at your game, cheering you on." He tried to smooth things over, to play the supportive figure. Sarah shrugged off his hand, her gaze unwavering. "Just don't sit too close to Mom," she warned him, her voice low but firm. "Dad will be there, and I don't want any trouble." The words were a bitter pill for Dale. Trouble, so as if his presence, his very existence, was merely a complication in their carefully constructed charade. Gary scoffed, a short, dismissive sound that cut through the quiet air. "Your dad won't even notice what's going on." He said it with a confidence that twisted the knife in Dale's gut. Gary truly believed Dale was that oblivious, that easily fooled, that unimportant. Then, to Dale's surprise, Carol Ann interjected. Her voice had a strange edge, a sudden defensiveness. "Gary, don't talk about Dale like that. He's my husband and Sarah's father. He deserves respect." The words felt hollow, a performance for Sarah, or perhaps a fleeting moment of self-recrimination. Dale listened, a numb feeling spreading through him. "Respect," she said. Sarah shot back immediately, her anger barely contained. "Respect after everything that's happened? I just want to finish school." Her voice cracked slightly, revealing the raw emotion beneath her sharp exterior. Dale watched, his stomach churning, his daughter caught in the middle, trying to navigate a landscape that had crumbled beneath her feet. Carol Ann ignored the barb, pressing on, insistent. "We won't be getting a divorce. Dale and I will grow old together." It was a declaration, a desperate attempt to maintain the illusion, to cling to the familiar narrative of their life together, despite the stark reality laid out before them. "You're mistaken," Sarah declared, her voice cold and steady, surprising Dale with its conviction. "Dad won't put up with this forever, and Gary isn't worth it. You're just using each other." The blunt assessment, the raw truth spoken by his own daughter, resonated through Dale. It confirmed his worst fears, yet also offered a strange sense of clarity. Carol Ann, flustered, her composure finally cracking, waved her hand dismissively. "Go on, get to school, and Dale is a good husband. Don't you forget it." She sounded hollow, unconvincing. Dale saw the slight tremor in her hands as she pushed Sarah away. Gary, standing a little to the side, commented quietly, "She's angry, isn't she?" Carol Ann sighed, running a hand through her hair. "She'll be fine. She understands. She'll keep quiet." The casual reassurance, the assumption that Sarah would simply fall in line, was chilling. It implied a long-standing understanding, a complicity that reached deeper than Dale could have imagined. Dale sat in his car, numb. The infidelity itself was a brutal blow, a betrayal that had shattered his world. But Sarah's quiet acceptance, her understanding of the affair, even her reluctant participation in the charade, felt like a deeper cut. His daughter, forced to navigate the wreckage of her parents' marriage, had somehow found a way to cope, a way to move forward, even if it meant carrying the burden of their secret. He knew he couldn't face them. Not tonight. Not after this. The thought of sitting in the stands, watching Sarah play, pretending everything was normal, while Gary and Carol Ann exchanged glances, was unbearable. For the first time, Dale Miller would miss his daughter's volleyball game. He sat there staring at the empty motel entrance, the silence in the car heavy with unspoken grief. The drive home was a blur of highway lights and the dull thrum of the engine. Dale was too shattered to attend the game. The thought of sitting there, a silent spectator to his own humiliation, was unbearable. He pulled into his driveway, the familiar two-story house looming in the twilight. Inside, he went straight to the refrigerator, pulling out a couple of beers, the cold aluminum, a small comfort in his shaking hand. He sat down at the kitchen table, the yellow formica gleaming under the fluorescent light, and simply sat with his unraveling world. The thought of Carol Ann refusing the floor to move, not because of some grand personal ambition, but because of Gary Jenkins, twisted in his gut. It was a small, petty detail, yet it solidified the betrayal, reducing his dreams to dust. He had pictured them, walking on the beach, a new start. Now the beach seemed miles away, and he was alone. He reflected on his unwavering loyalty, the decades of quiet devotion. The trust he'd placed in her, in their shared life, had been cruelly misused. He saw it all now, the small shifts, the distant gazes, the late nights Carol Ann dismissed as extra work at the office. He had been a fool, trusting blindly, while she had built a secret life just beneath the surface of their own. A cold plan began to form, a fragile seed of defiance in the wreckage of his mind. Carol Ann didn't know about Florida. He'd kept the promotion a secret, wanting to surprise her, to present it as a new adventure for them. She still thought his potential transfer was to Michigan, a colder, more industrial landscape that he knew she would resent. He could go to Florida alone. He could gain precious space to sort through the wreckage of his family, to lick his wounds without the constant performance of normalcy. It was a small act of independence, a way to reclaim a sliver of control, he decided. After Thanksgiving, when the company expected him to be settled, he would drive south. Not north to the imagined cold of Michigan, but south to the warmth and distance of Daytona Beach. He would leave her to figure out her own path. He found some old sleep aid in the back of the medicine cabinet, swallowed 2 pills, and chased them with another beer. The world began to blur around the edges. He retreated to the guest room, the unused space a fitting sanctuary for his solitude. He closed the door firmly, the click of the lock a small, satisfying sound in the quiet house. Later, much later, Sarah's silver Civic pulled into the driveway. She saw Dale's truck, parked, dark. She wondered why he hadn't come to her game, a knot forming in her stomach. Inside, Carol Ann found the empty beer cans on the kitchen table, a silent testament to Dale's uncharacteristic behavior. She knew then he hadn't gone to the game. They found Dale in the guest room, fast asleep, the covers tangled around him. Carol Ann looked at him, then at Sarah. He must not have been feeling well. She dismissed it, her voice lacking conviction. Just leave him. She pulled the door almost shut, not quite latching it, leaving a sliver of light from the hall. Carol Ann then turned to Sarah, a bright, artificial smile on her face. Gary said you played a great game tonight, honey. He said you were really on fire. The casual remark, a throwaway line, instantly ignited Sarah's anger, fresh and sharp despite the late hour. I don't care what Gary thinks, Sarah retorted, her voice tight with resentment. She wasn't looking at her mother, but at the scuff marks on the kitchen floor. He's not someone I want to see again. The words were an indictment, not just of Gary, but of Carol Ann for allowing him into their lives. Carol Ann sighed, a long, drawn-out sound of exasperation. He makes me feel young, Sarah. You're still young, you need a reliable man. The confession hung in the air, a desperate plea for understanding, a justification for her actions. Sarah's expression softened slightly. her anger momentarily replaced by a flicker of worry. I'm worried about Dad if he learns about Gary, she admitted, her gaze drifting toward the guest room door. He won't take it well? Carol Ann's voice tightened, a steel thread running through it. He won't suspect a thing if you keep quiet, Sarah. Your father trusts me completely. The certainty in her voice was chilling. It implied not just a hope that Dale wouldn't find out, but a firm belief that he was incapable of seeing the truth, that his trust was a weakness she could exploit indefinitely. At 5 a.m., the house was still dark, cloaked in the quiet of early morning. Dale rose silently from the guest room bed, the unfamiliar mattress still feeling foreign beneath him. He dressed in the dim light, pulling on jeans and a plain shirt, each movement deliberate, unhurried. He slipped out of the house, a quiet shadow, leaving no trace behind. The air outside was cool, crisp with the promise of a new day. He drove to IHOP, finding a booth by the window, the mundane comfort of lukewarm coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs, a welcome distraction. As he ate, his phone buzzed. It was Carol Ann. He let it ring twice before answering, his voice flat when he spoke. Hello? Dale, where are you? Why didn't you come home last night? You missed Sarah's game. Her voice was a practiced blend of concern and accusation, a performance he was all too familiar with. I just wanted to be a little unpredictable, Dale said, the words feeling alien on his tongue. He paused, letting the silence stretch, then simply hung up. He turned off his phone, the small click a definitive end to the conversation, to their usual pattern. He spent the rest of the morning packing, not just clothes, but his tools, his old fishing gear, the small personal effects that made up his life. Each item he placed in a box was a step towards a new, colder beginning in Florida. The house felt vast and empty around him, the silence echoing his resolve. He worked methodically, carefully, resolving to keep his true destination a secret until after Thanksgiving. Let them believe he was going north, to Michigan. Let them believe in the fiction he had inadvertently created. He returned home in the late afternoon. Carol Ann was waiting for him, her arms crossed, her expression a familiar mix of disappointment and irritation. Where have you been, Dale? You can't just disappear like that. Her usual reprimands, once capable of stirring a flicker of guilt, now fell on deaf ears. 2 days ago, he would have felt a surge of shame, a need to explain himself. Now, there was nothing, just a hollow space where the guilt used to be. He simply nodded, an almost imperceptible movement, and left again. He drove to a sports pub on the outskirts of town, a place he hadn't been to in years. He ordered a beer, watched a baseball game on a large screen, and found a strange sort of peace in the anonymous comfort of the noisy room. He could still enjoy himself, he realized, even amidst the wreckage. The thought was both unsettling and liberating. He returned home at 11 p.m. The house was quiet, a single lamp glowing in the living room. Carol Ann and Sarah were on the sofa watching a movie, their faces etched with disapproval as he walked through the door. The television light flickered across their set expressions. Carol Ann paused the movie, the sudden silence heavy. Dale, you owe me an apology for missing Sarah's game and for disappearing all day. Her voice was firm, demanding. Okay, Dale mumbled, the word barely audible. He walked past them, not meeting their gaze, and began gathering a fresh set of clothes from his dresser for the guest room. Sarah watched him, then turned to her mother. He doesn't seem to care that you're upset, she observed, her voice low. It's as if he prefers sleeping in the guest room now. Carol Ann forced a smile, a brittle, false thing. You don't know your father, Sarah. He won't last 2 nights before coming back to our bed. She said it with a practiced certainty, as if willing it to be true. Sarah, however, seemed less convinced. She shook her head slightly. But I hope he doesn't find out about Gary. The casual mention of the name hung in the air, a phantom in the room. Carol Ann's false smile vanished. Her voice, when she spoke, was tight, a visible strain on her composure. Stop saying his name, Sarah. I want to keep this a secret. Her confidence wavered, a crack in the carefully constructed facade. Sarah looked at her mother, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. If he's not ready to be with you, she said, her voice quiet but firm, maybe it's on you to help him grow up. The implication was clear. The responsibility for the fractured marriage wasn't just Dale's. Carol Ann was stunned by her daughter's boldness. by the unexpected challenge. She felt her control slip, the carefully managed narrative of their family unraveling before her eyes. Yet deep down, a stubborn certainty remained. Dale would come around. He always did. Dale woke early again on Sunday, the guest room still feeling sterile and unfamiliar. He went through his now established routine: silent dressing, a quiet departure, and breakfast at the local IHOP. Afterward, he took a long walk in the crisp November air, the biting cold a stark contrast to the warmth he envisioned in Florida. He savored the solitude, the quiet hum of his own thoughts, and the growing promise of a new, uncomplicated life. Back home, he maintained his distant silence with Carol Ann. They sat in the living room, ostensibly watching football, but the chasm between them had widened into an unbridgeable canyon. Every glance, every rustle of her magazine felt like a silent accusation, a reminder of the deception that now permeated their shared space. Dale felt nothing. The emotional well had run dry. His boss, Ed Thompson, called later that afternoon, his voice booming over the phone. "Just checking in on the Daytona promotion, Dale. Still good to go?" Dale assured him, his commitment unwavering. He was more than ready. Ed then mentioned needing a replacement for Dale's old position, a casual query that sparked a cynical thought in Dale's mind. "You know," Dale said, a slight pause in his voice, "Chad Reynolds, Sarah's ex-boyfriend, he's a sharp kid, good with numbers. Might be looking for something steady." He knew the name would sting Carol Ann, a subtle twist of the knife, a little detail she wouldn't immediately grasp as a deliberate act. He even made a quick, casual call to Chad Reynolds later, feigning concern about his job prospects. "Heard the company's looking on for someone, Chad. Might be worth dropping a resume. Carol Ann might even put in a good word for you, being the family friend she is." The lie felt sharp, precise. Chad's old connection to Sarah, and now to Carol Ann, was a perfectly designed lever to pull. Thanksgiving dinner was a tense affair, the silence between Dale and Carol Ann thick with unspoken accusations. Sarah, sensing the atmosphere, picked at her food, avoiding eye contact. The meal passed in a blur of forced politeness and strained smiles. After the dishes were cleared, Dale made his announcement. He stood by the living room fireplace, looking at Carol Ann and Sarah, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "My transfer is official. I'm driving up to Michigan tomorrow morning." It was a carefully constructed lie, a fabrication he hoped would buy him enough time, enough distance. He kissed Carol Ann goodbye. Her cheek felt cold beneath his lips, and he felt nothing in return, only an emptiness where affection once resided. His heart was a hollow drum, beating a rhythm of departure. He left a note for Sarah on her bedside table, maintaining the Michigan charade. "Heading north for the new job. Be safe. Call me when you can. Love, Dad." It was simple, familiar, designed to ensure his absence wouldn't raise immediate alarms, to keep the deception intact a little longer. As he drove south, the barren November landscape giving way to warmer hues, a bitter satisfaction settled over Dale. He had ample evidence for divorce now. The motel, Gary, Sarah's knowledge. He could fight for full custody of Sarah, and he knew he would win. The thought brought a strange sense of peace. He called Carol Ann from a gas station somewhere in Virginia, still playing the dutiful husband heading north. He listened to her unaware voice, her complaints about his sudden departure, the subtle manipulations she always employed. He simply nodded, letting her talk, the phone warm against his ear. Arriving in Daytona, the warm, unfamiliar air felt like a balm on his skin. He found his new apartment, a small, clean space overlooking a quiet street. He felt a strange lightness, a lifting of the burden he'd carried for so long. The distant roar of the ocean was a promise, a new beginning. As the warm breeze brushed against his face, a thought occurred to him. Life's choices are often costly, and the true price isn't always paid up front. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. For weeks, the calls came daily. Carol Ann, believing Dale was enduring the frigid Michigan winter, would complain about the cold, the gray skies, the dullness of everything without him. She expressed doubts about moving, about leaving Pennsylvania, her voice tinged with a familiar reluctance. Dale played along, pretending to commiserate, offering vague reassurances about how tough the change would be, how she'd miss her friends, subtly encouraging her to stay put. Each conversation was a thread cut, a step further into his new life. He quietly informed Ed Thompson that he was considering bringing Sarah to Florida alone after she finished the school year. Ed, a practical man, simply nodded, understanding the unspoken implications. Dale was solidifying his new life, brick by quiet brick. Back in Pennsylvania, Chad Reynolds, Sarah's ex, applied for Dale's old job. He was oblivious, a simple, earnest young man, unaware of the subtle machinations Dale had set in motion. Ed Thompson, impressed by Chad's earnestness and his decent resume, hired him. The irony was not lost on Dale. Chad was now placed directly under Carol Ann's supervision, a silent testament to Dale's calculated moves. One Tuesday morning, Chad, innocent and unsuspecting, made a casual remark to Carol Ann in the office. "Mr. Thompson said I'd be stepping into Dale's old role. Big shoes to fill, especially with him down in Daytona Beach now." The words hung in the air, sparking a cold, sharp suspicion in Carol Ann. Daytona Beach, not Michigan. Carol Ann's confusion quickly turned to alarm. "Daytona Beach? What are you talking about, Chad? He's in Michigan." She pressed him, her voice tight, a tremor of fear beginning to take hold. Chad, flustered, inadvertently confirmed Dale's true location. He tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Carol Ann, her face pale, stormed into Ed Thompson's office, ignoring his secretary's polite protestations. "Ed, is Dale in Daytona Beach?" she demanded, her voice rising. Ed, caught completely off guard, fumbled for words. He nodded slowly, confirming the deception. The carefully constructed lie shattered, leaving Carol Ann's world in fragments. She immediately retreated to her office, her hands shaking as she dialed Dale's number. Her voice, when he answered, was a volatile mix of fury and fear, barely controlled. "Dale? What the hell is going on? Daytona Beach? You lied to me." Dale listened, his grip on the phone steady. He felt a quiet satisfaction, a cold triumph. "I'm in Florida," he stated calmly, his voice devoid of any emotion. "And I'm not coming back. I know about Gary. You'll get nothing." The words were precise, unyielding, cutting through her anger like a surgeon's scalpel. On the other end of the line, Carol Ann's world collapsed. Her comfortable life, her carefully laid plans with Gary, her assumed control over Dale, all ruined. The fantasy of a smooth transition, of keeping Dale in her orbit while pursuing her own desires, dissolved into bitter reality. She had banked on his unwavering trust, on his predictable loyalty, and he had proven her wrong in the most devastating way. She pleaded with him, her voice cracking, desperate. "Dale, please, don't do this. Come home. We can fix this." But Dale hung up, the click of the phone a final, irreversible sound. He left her to face the wreckage she had created, alone in a house that once held their shared life. The Florida sun streamed through his window, warm and indifferent. Panicked and desperate, her mind a whirlwind of recrimination and fear, Carol Ann drove straight to Gary Jenkins' house. The familiar suburban street, lined with neatly manicured lawns, seemed alien, almost mocking. She pulled into his driveway, a red haze behind her eyes, the engine still running as she stormed out. She pounded on the front door, a frantic, insistent rhythm against the solid wood. She demanded to speak with him, oblivious to the fact that she was about to confront not just Gary, but the family she had unwittingly entangled in her mess. The door opened slowly. Gary's wife, Beth Jenkins, stood there, a stern woman with tired eyes that now held a chilling, cold recognition. Her face was a mask of grim reality. Beth didn't invite Carol Ann in. She simply stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance. Beth confronted Carol Ann, her voice low and steady, each word a hammer blow. "I know everything, Carol Ann. I know about you and Gary." There was no emotion, no hysterics, just a quiet, devastating certainty. The affair, once a carefully guarded secret, was now laid bare. Just then, Gary's car pulled into the driveway, his headlights cutting through the late afternoon gloom. He killed the engine, got out, and saw the two women standing at his doorstep, their faces etched with a tension that instantly told him his secret was out. His shoulders slumped, his confident posture collapsing. Beth, without turning, spoke to him, her voice publicly cutting through the quiet street. "Gary, come here." Her rage simmered beneath the surface, contained but potent. He tried to deny it, to lie his way out, his eyes darting between Beth and Carol Ann. "Honey, I don't know what she's talking about." "Don't lie to me," Beth interrupted, her voice gaining force. "I have your phone records, your text messages, the cold, hard proof of your betrayal." She didn't need to shout. The quiet certainty of her words, the undeniable evidence, was enough to silence him. With a final withering look, Beth turned to Carol Ann. "Get off my property, now!" Her marriage, she knew, was shattered, but she wouldn't let Carol Ann stand on her porch one moment longer. Gary, cornered and exposed, finally confessed to Beth, trying desperately to shift blame, to paint Carol Ann as the aggressor. "She was lonely, Beth. I tried to help her." His cowardice was transparent, a pathetic attempt that Beth saw right through. Beth, her eyes narrowed, gave Gary an ultimatum. "You choose, Gary, right now. Your family or her. If you don't cut her off completely, I will expose your affair to our entire community, to your church, to your colleagues, to everyone." The threat was clear: public ruin, a swift and brutal end to his comfortable life. Gary, faced with the stark reality of his impending social and professional destruction, crumbled. He chose his family, his head bowed in defeat. "I'm sorry, Carol Ann, it's over." He wouldn't even look at her as he said it. He retreated into the house, leaving Carol Ann utterly alone on the porch, the weight of his finality settling heavily upon her. Carol Ann stood there for a long moment, reeling from Gary's betrayal, the cold finality of his rejection. She felt a desperate need to connect, to find someone, anyone who understood. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling, and tried to call Sarah. Her daughter, however, hurt and disgusted by her mother's actions, saw the incoming call. She let it ring, watching it vibrate on her bed, then silenced it. She wouldn't answer. Consumed by anger and a burning sense of injustice, Carol Ann wasted no time. She hired Mr. Davidson, a formidable lawyer known for his aggressive tactics. She walked into his polished office, her voice tight with indignation, determined to fight Dale, to reclaim what she believed was hers. Mr. Davidson, a man with shrewd eyes and a detached demeanor, listened patiently. He reviewed the evidence Dale had meticulously collected: motel receipts, subtle photographs he'd taken, even the implied knowledge of Sarah. It was a damning collection, each piece tightening the noose around Carol Ann's narrative. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles south in Florida, Dale had already secured his own representation. Mrs. Jenkins, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney, took on his case. She was efficient, her questions precise, and her understanding of the law unwavering. The first thing she discovered was a bombshell. Carol Ann had drained their joint bank accounts, leaving Dale furious. Every penny, gone. "She's trying to cut you off," Mrs. Jenkins stated plainly, "to force your hand." Mrs. Jenkins then laid out Carol Ann's likely strategy. "Her lawyer will try to paint you as an absent, deadbeat dad for leaving Pennsylvania," she warned, her voice calm. "They'll say you abandoned your family, that you ran off to Florida to avoid your responsibilities." Dale listened, a cold fury rising within him. He had meticulously planned his escape, not to abandon, but to survive. Carol Ann's legal team, through Mr. Davidson, proposed a settlement. It was exactly as Mrs. Jenkins had predicted. Dale would pay substantial alimony, a significant portion of his salary, and a hefty sum in child support. The numbers were astronomical, designed to cripple him, to punish him for daring to leave. Dale, through Mrs. Jenkins, flatly refused. His answer was unambiguous. "Tell them I have irrefutable evidence of infidelity," he instructed his lawyer, his voice steady. "Tell them she'll get nothing beyond what the law requires for Sarah." The message was clear, the resolve unshakable. The lawyers exchanged heated, accusatory calls. The negotiations quickly turned bitter, escalating into a war of attrition. Mr. Davidson argued Dale's abandonment. Mrs. Jenkins countered with Carol Ann's infidelity. The legal maneuvering became a brutal dance, each side trying to gain the upper hand. Mrs. Jenkins, ever practical, advised Dale to solidify his case further. "We need more than just circumstantial evidence for the court to side with you fully on custody," she explained. "Sarah's testimony could be crucial. Her direct knowledge of her mother's affair would be a powerful weapon." The suggestion hung in the air, a difficult truth. It meant asking his daughter to testify against her own mother. Dale knew it was a heavy burden to place on Sarah, but he also knew the truth had to come out. He called Sarah. The phone rang for a long time. Then she answered, her voice guarded. He could tell she was torn, caught between her parents, a victim of their war. But her mother's lies, her casual dismissals, had left a deep scar, he realized. He could hear it in the fragile tone of her voice. Sarah, after a long silence, admitted her own pain and resentment. Mom never cared about anyone but herself, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. And you, Dad, you just let her. You let her walk all over you. The words were an indictment of both of them, a raw outpouring of years of silent observation. She resented her mother's actions, but also his silence, his passivity. As Sarah spoke, a fragile hope emerged. Dale realized that Sarah might speak the truth, even if it meant exposing her own mother, even if it meant tearing apart the last remnants of their family. She was tired of the lies, tired of the pretense. She wanted out. In the solemn quiet of the courtroom, Sarah Miller took the stand. She was 16, but her face held a maturity beyond her years, a bravery that belied her youth. Her voice, though soft at first, grew steady as she spoke. She confirmed her mother's affair with Gary Jenkins, describing the subtle shifts, the hushed conversations, the motel. She spoke of her own painful knowledge of the deception, the burden of the secret she had carried. Dale watched her, a knot in his throat. This was the key. The court, presented with Dale's undeniable evidence, the motel receipts, the photographs, the careful timeline he had constructed, and now Sarah's unwavering testimony, ruled decisively. The judgment came down swift and absolute. Dale was granted full custody of Sarah. Carol Ann received no alimony, her actions, her infidelity, having cost her everything. The court recognized the deliberate betrayal, the calculated lies, and sided with the truth. Carol Ann was left with nothing but the hollow echoes of her choices. Her comfortable life, her assumed security, had evaporated. Her plans for a new future with Gary, already shattered, now seemed like a cruel joke. Her life, as she knew it, was in ruins. Dale and Sarah moved permanently to Florida that summer. They packed up the last boxes, leaving the cold, bitter memories of the Midwest behind them. The small house in Pennsylvania, once a home, now stood as a silent monument to what had been lost. The drive south was long, but this time it was a journey toward a tangible future, not a deceptive escape. Dale focused on his new job, finding purpose in the routine, the structure. But the more daunting task was rebuilding his fractured relationship with Sarah. He watched her, a quiet observer, trying to understand the depth of her hurt. He knew his silence, his years of passivity, had also contributed to her pain. He tried to talk, to listen, to be present in a way he hadn't before. Sarah struggled. The upheaval, the new environment, the unfamiliar school, all compounded the profound hurt inflicted by her mother's betrayal. She was quiet, often retreating into herself, navigating a landscape of unfamiliar faces and an emotional void where her mother used to be. The sunshine felt alien sometimes, a stark contrast to the shadows in her heart. Carol Ann made attempts to reach out, calls, text messages, even a few letters. But Dale and Sarah, for their own healing, blocked her. The wounds were too fresh, the betrayal too deep. They needed space, distance, a clean break to begin the arduous process of mending. Gary Jenkins, too, faced the painful consequences within his own family. The affair became an open secret in their small community, the quiet judgment a constant presence. His marriage, though not legally dissolved, was irrevocably broken, existing in a state of cold truce. He kept his job, but his reputation was permanently stained. Dale often reflected on the profound cost of betrayal, the shattered pieces of what was once a family, the bitter taste of justice that, while earned, offered little comfort. He looked at Sarah, so resilient yet so fragile, and understood that some losses can never be truly recovered. Sarah slowly began to heal. She found new connections at school, tentatively reached out to new friends. The raw edges of her pain softened, replaced by a fragile sense of stability in their new life. The ocean became her solace, its vastness a reminder of the world beyond her past. The Miller family, scarred but with a quiet resilience, forged a new path. The Midwestern storm, that quiet, destructive force, had finally settled. It left behind only the dust of what was lost and the enduring strength of those who survived it.